So joining us now, ESPN NBA Front Office Insider Bobby Marks, who's always kind to join us, very nice to us with his time, and of course, being just a game away from the NBA Finals here. We're getting in as much of the basketball talk as we can here on the show. Bobby, thanks so much for joining us as always. I really appreciate it. As a former front office exec, are other teams, are other front office GMs, assistant GMs, presidents, are they looking around asking each other, why can't we find the undrafted guys? We keep hearing over and over, undrafted, undrafted, undrafted. We're not talking one undrafted guy to contribute. We're talking a handful of undrafted guys contribute every single night on a team that is making an historic run right now in the Miami Heat. Are other front office executives looking at each other and saying, why can't we do this?
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing story. I think it's more about what happens when they get there. I think it's one thing to go undrafted and bounce around a bunch of teams, but it's another thing to get to Miami, whether you're on a two-way contract and you're playing in Sioux Falls, or you're with the organization and you're a developmental player here, and then kind of what that next step is. I think anybody can go out and find undrafted players or players who've kind of fallen through the cracks. But, Caleb Martin was on a two-way, right? Max and Gabe kind of rose up through the system here as far as being in, paying their dues with Sioux Falls. Duncan Robinson the same way here. So that's if I'm working in a front office, I'm looking at my player development department, right? Saying like, how do we emulate what the Heat have been able to do with some of these, players, as you said, 8 or 9 undrafted players here. And that's where, like, if your team's like Golden State and your team's like the Clippers and you're these high spent, like that's what the Heat have done. The model right now is basically going to have to be the model for teams that spend a lot of money into the future as far as where this new collective bargaining agreement is going to be. It's those under the radar players that you find that you sign to cheap contracts and then you were able to retain.
They're essentially the NBA's Moneyball team, right? Like they're finding the hidden value and it being able to manage. I mean, and in baseball, it's funny because Moneyball is associated with baseball. There's a tax, but there's no salary cap. Moneyball, you would think, would really be important in a salary cap sport to find the value within the margins, which the Heat have been doing.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it right on the head. I mean, some players, maybe not. Maybe if you took Gabe off this roster, maybe he doesn't fit in a certain situation, just depending on how the roster is constructed, because he can play with the ball, he can play off the ball here. But it's kind of like you just plug and play, right? So if Max Strus becomes too expensive in free agency, then you go out and you find the next guy who maybe 2 years from now can be like that. And it's kind of like you continually kind of, you turn these players into, rotational slash starting players.
It was mentioned at the end of the broadcast the other night on TNT, and the inside crew was saying, hey, Caleb Martin, he's about to get paid. Well, not really.
I know, that's why I put it out there. I put it out there because I had heard it, and I know it's kind of like the cliche thing when players get it going here, and like if you said to me like, hey, Gabe Vincent's gonna get paid, I'm like, you're right. He's probably gonna, I mean, like there's a limit, as far as what he's not gonna get $20 million, right? Like, but yeah, with Caleb, like, yeah, he did sign a 3-year $20 million contract just a year ago. He could become a free agent in 2024 because he's got a player option in his contract here. So they've got him on a nice contract here, and I think that's kind of, like there's going to be a little bit of a domino effect. Like, the Heat are going to have some choices to make based on where their free agents are going to be, with Gabe and Max are their two main guys. It's funny, I wrote the offseason article going into that Chicago game. I had to, right? I didn't have a choice. It's the longest standing offseason article that still has not come out yet. And I've updated it multiple times here. And what I said in there, towards, with regards to Gabe and Max is that how this new collective bargaining agreement sets up is that teams have basically kind of a 1-year reprieve, right? Before really some of these really harsh restrictions start in 2025. So you can technically keep both of these players, even with Kyle's big number on the books here, and not get as penalized as you will in the future. However, what I didn't take into account was the Caleb Martin play here, because he's going to be a free agent potentially in 24, and his whatever $7 million salary might be a little bit higher here. So that's a story for another day. But I mean, listen, what Miami's been able to do, and you've seen this team forever here, and it's not a fluke. I mean, I've picked them in every series here, and and I'm the only. I think me and George Sedano, and I saw George in the hallway yesterday out here in LA, and I picked them in the Denver series here. Like, can they beat Denver? Yeah, I do. It's going to be hard. I mean, this Denver team is a different animal here, just because their size. They're well coached. They're resilient. But I've seen this team play all year. I've seen them play for they don't quit. This Miami team does not quit at all. And if you told them 2 weeks now, Heat in 6, I would say doesn't surprise me at all.
Is Caleb Martin and what we're seeing from him, is it a mirage, or whatever happens in the finals, will we go into the offseason saying, okay, we believe in Caleb Martin? As now I understand, Tyler Hero's on the team, and we could talk about his status in a moment, but will they go into next year saying, yeah, we believe in Caleb Martin as part of this core?
You have to. I mean, players, and I know some people want to use kind of the analogy of like, NCAA in an NCAA tournament, players getting hot, and then all of a sudden you go to the lottery here. I mean, I've seen enough playoffs mean something. Putting players in a meaningful Game 7 on the road to put up that performance, you can do that anywhere. You can do it in Game 30 of the regular season here. I still think there's probably more out there for him for another year of body of work before you could say, hey, he's going to be the guy getting 4 years, $60 million, or one of these big numbers here. Like, where he's at is a great number, and he has certainly turned a good contract into a great contract here. But I still think there's more for me, or for people, if you're evaluating players, to see over a more body of work here. But I think the one thing you learn that you can trust them. You can trust them in big spots, and how you do that is, you get to an NBA Finals, you have a great conference finals where you're basically one vote away from being named MVP.
Did you have a problem with Jimmy getting the Eastern Conference MVP?
I didn't. I mean, his games 1, 2, and 7 were off the charts. Game 3 was the blowout. So I didn't. I understood where how the voting goes here. Caleb was consistent. I thought throughout the play, he was tremendous. And I thought in Game 6, the home game, he was off the charts. In Game 7, he was consistent here. So, but I thought Jimmy was great in Game 7. So I didn't have it was 5-4. I didn't have a problem at all as far as who got MVP.
I just felt when Jimmy had a great game, they won those games.
Yeah.
When he had a poor game, they lost those 3 games. To me, that's the most valuable player then.
Yeah, no, that's usually how we should judge it, as far as how much of an impact that player has on the game.
You mentioned you've had your offseason outlook for the Heat written since the play in the game against Chicago. And it's funny because I remember doing shows the day leading up to that game, and there was a portion of the Heat fan base that wanted them to lose that night because they believed this team had run its course. I wasn't one of those, but believed this team had run its course, and a loss in the play-in in embarrassing fashion would force major changes. Of course, here we are now. Is this the most improbable run to the finals you've ever seen? Because the only other time there's been an 8 seed, it was New York in 99, which knocked off the Heat, Allen Houston in the first round. But that Knicks team, Marcus Camby, Latrell Sprewell, even Larry Johnson, I believe, they missed so much time due to injury during that lockout shortened season. They were a little bit of an unfair 8 seed. So is this the most improbable run?
I think so. I mean, the one thing, and I wrote about it, is that second most games missed this season. I think 29 different starting lineups. So it wasn't like this roster was intact the whole year. Like you could say, like, hey, this was the same group we ran out for 82 games, and this is kind of who they are. And all of a sudden, it turned around here. I think what's amazing here is that you haven't had your third best player since game 1 of the Milwaukee series, and you were able to beat the 1, 2, and 4 seeds in the playoffs to get to the NBA Finals, and everybody else has been able to step up with Tyler out here. I'm interested to see if he returns. I'm interested to see how Eric uses him.
You bring him off the bench, right? You see what
definitely.
you got.
And... Oh yeah, and I thought there was moments in Game 6 where he could have been really valuable.
I thought he was going to play Game 6. Yeah. I did,
and I thought just the ability to kind of space the floor and get you get you some shots. I think he's valuable from a rebounding standpoint. I think he's one of the best rebounding guards out there. Just because when you go small, and as you saw, offensive rebounds kind of kill you because you're going with that small lineup of him going to the boards here. And so I'm interested to see what happens with certainly with Tyler here.
Let's do a couple of off-season things here real quick, Bobby Marks. Bob Myers, he steps down yesterday, GM of the Warriors. What do you make of that situation? Do you think there was a tipping point? Did it just feel like, did the Draymond Green, Jordan Poole stuff wear on him? What do you think happened there?
I just think you get burned out. I mean, I think it just runs its course. And Bob had a good line where it says, if you're not 100% committed to doing this, then it's not fair to the players. It's not fair to the front office. Joe Lacob's a tough owner. I mean, you saw the press conference where Joe Lacob said, hey, Bob's going to be with me through June 30th. And he's going to be, and basically Bob Myers is like, are you kidding me? I'm done. Right. It's over. There's no more here. And the expectation to win every year, certainly expectation with that payroll every year. I don't know if there was a tipping point here, but I do think you get to a point where, you want to maybe do something different. And I think he'll probably take a year off. He's still young enough, and he'll run a team eventually again. There's a lot of questions there, certainly with Draymond becoming a free agent. Klay Thompson's going into the last year, the new collective bargaining agreement, how stringent it is going to be with this roster. How does this roster improve outside of splitting up Curry, Thompson, and Green? Certainly we'll look at Jordan Poole probably in the offseason. But no, I just think you get burnt out doing this. I mean, it's a daily grind. I mean, this is why I sleep better at night in the media, right? I couldn't, if I ever wanted to get back in, I needed to be fully 100% invested, and I'm not. I enjoy it, but I'm not. I don't know if I can do the daily grind that these guys do.
Off-season outlook: Boston Celtics, the coach Jaylen Brown. What are we looking at there?
Yeah, after they were down 3-0, I had a section in the Celtics offseason on Joe Mazzulla, their head coach, and I know he signed an extension. And I mentioned on TV on Tuesday, that if I was the Celtics, I would look at what else is out there. And I know they just signed him to an extension. I thought getting to a Game 7 probably saved him. He's got a lot of money left on his deal, but I looked at what was, this is certainly before Philadelphia hired Nick Nurse. There's a wealth of veteran coaches out there, whether it be Monty Williams or Mike Budenholzer or even Doc Rivers and Nick Nurse beforehand. Would that be a better fit, or do they just kind of, bolster up the depth of the coaching staff as far as bringing more veterans here with Mazzulla? And that's probably going to be the likely outcome here, as far as it's not the DNA of Brad Stevens, certainly. And you could say, hey, it's almost like with Miami with Eric, right? Back in the day here, as far as if they see a young coach that's got a lot of promise, but maybe you need to just kind of put better people around him or kind of upgrade your coaching staff, you do that. The Jaylen Brown situation is going to be fascinating. He's eligible for that big Supermax extension. Only one player who's ever turned it down was Kawhi back in San Antonio. I think he will be offered it. I think he will sign it. I think what we'll see is that you're kind of in a holding pattern with this group until maybe a year from now or 2 years from now, and then maybe you do pivot. But it's hard for me to break up two players who are at 25 and 26 who play a position of need in this league and who are two top 20 players. Brown had a not good series. We all realize that. I think he was hurt. I felt like he was hurt. That's not an excuse here, but for me, I would still sign him. I would sign Tatum next year. And then I kind of figure out, hey, if I got to move Jaylen Brown a year from now, I can do that here. And I think he's got more value on one of these long-term extensions than on an expiring contract.
Thanks a lot for joining us, Bobby. And again, Bobby Marks is one of probably just a couple on ESPN.com, and you've been doing it all year. You got the Heat winning this series.
I do. I have them in 6 games. I was gonna say Denver in 7, then I said no. I live in Florida. I'm going to stick with the Heat. I've ridden them all year here, and we'll see if in 2 weeks from now if I'm right or not.
Tell everyone you got stuff coming out over the next couple days leading into game one, I imagine.
Yeah, so we have, we've got something coming out and how the rosters were built for both teams here. It's kind of a little bit of a different style. Denver has basically built this, through the draft, certainly with Jokic, Murray, Porter. Miami's been different, certainly free agency, and then the Butler trade, and then you had Bam and Tyler in the draft here. So a look at that, and then we'll have the Denver and Miami offseason article. They're the last 2 teams left. We've got all 28 teams up already. We'll have a bunch of free agency stuff leading up to June 30th. We've got the draft in 3 weeks, June 22nd here. So we're heading into a very busy month of June.
Great job, Bobby. Thanks a lot for hanging out with us again. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.